What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another video from Pink Tourmaline, and we're finally getting into the Nag Hammadi scriptures. And in particular, this video is going to be focused on one section that is very important, I think, to many people who have dove into the Gnostic texts and Gnosticism, and that is the secret book of John, or the Apocryphon of John. So, this is going to be my first video breaking down some of the written works in the Nag Hammadi texts and scriptures, and I'm just doing my best to try and understand what I'm reading, and also bear in mind that I'm reading this within the framework and the context of so much of what I've learned in the last several months about data and information received from remote viewers. This whole theory of the soul trap, books that I've read from Howdy Mikowski, Jason Georgiani, William Bullman, and others. So I'm just trying to piece everything together. And I know a lot of folks give a lot of credibility to the Apocryphon of John and the general scriptures from Nag Hammadi. So that's why I'm reading it, and that's why I'm trying to pay attention to it and see how things can just kind of line up. So I'm going to go along, and I've selected a bunch of excerpts. This section of the scriptures is not really that long, but I've taken a lot of sections out, some just to explain the story and explain, I think, just so you can see the lore of Yaldabaoth and that whole history. If you've maybe seen it in videos, but you haven't actually seen the text, I'm going to show you guys the text, and we're going to read through it. And then other sections, I think, may have some significance and some answers to what might be happening in this realm. Others lead to more questions. So there's a lot of stuff. Without further ado, let's get into the mix. And these are all in order. So this first section, I've got three big chunks here that describe the one. And I just thought this was really cool because this basically describes, if you want to call it source, if you want to call it God, and it describes it in a way that feels unique to me, but in a positive way. And I just wanted to share how the Nag Hammadi scriptures describes source, the God mind, whatever you want to call it. So we're going to go through this section. I do find it interesting, and here we go. And notice, right? There's no personification. There's no likening to a human or a male figure or anything like that. In fact, it's the opposite. I feel like it goes out of its way to not liken it to us whatsoever. All right, so here we go. I asked if I might understand this, and it said to me, the one is a sovereign that has nothing over it. It is God and parent, father of all, the invisible one that is over the all, that is incorruptible, that is pure light at which no eye can gaze. The one is the invisible spirit. We should not think of it as a God or like a God, right there, right? The separation. For it is greater than a God because there's nothing over it and no Lord above it. It does not exist within anything inferior to it, since everything exists within it. For it established itself. It is eternal, since it does not need anything. For it is absolutely complete. It has never lacked anything in order to be completed by. Rather, it is always absolutely complete in light. The one is illimitable, since there is nothing before it to limit it. Unfathomable, since there is nothing before it to fathom it. Immeasurable, since there was nothing before it to measure it. Invisible, since nothing has seen it. Eternal, since it exists eternally. Unutterable, since nothing could comprehend it to utter it. Unnameable, since there is nothing before it to give it a name. The one is the immeasurable light, pure, holy, immaculate. It is unutterable and is perfect in its incorruptibility. Not that it is just perfection or blessedness or divinity. It is much greater. The one is not corporeal and it is not incorporeal. The one is not large and it is not small. It is impossible to say how much is it, what kind is it, for no one can understand it. The one is not among the things that exist, but is much greater. Not that it is greater, rather, as it is in itself, it is not part of the Aeons or time. For whatever is part of realm was once prepared by another. Time was not allotted to it, since it receives nothing from anyone. What would be received would be on loan. The one who is first does not need to receive anything from another. Okay, it's saying source does not need anything, which is interesting too, because if you think about the idea of prayers or worship or things like that, this is basically saying, no, that's not at all part of the equation, which is fascinating. It beholds itself in its light. The one is majestic and has immeasurable purity. The one is a realm that gives a realm, life that gives life, a blessed one that gives blessedness, knowledge that gives knowledge, a good one that gives goodness, mercy that gives mercy and redemption, grace that gives grace. So there's a couple things that stand out to me. Number one, I do think that's fascinating because I think that goes against so much of what a lot of mainstream religions preach, this idea of kind of submitting and praying and giving things and effectively giving your worship as a means to salvation, and this seems in stark contrast to that. That's the first thing. The second thing is the way that it's described, which it is in a little bit of contrast in the way that the what's it called, the that team of remote viewers described remote viewing the God mind as perfectly balanced, meaning there is both light and dark within the God mind as they described it. Again, this is just Intuitive Underground's take, and right, you always have to take all their data as they mention themselves with a grain of salt, right? They're viewing different things, and nothing is 100% when you're remote viewing. But I do find that interesting. It is in contrast with that. It's the way it's being described here in this gospel, where I think it's Jesus is talking to John. He describes it as just absolute perfect light. And what's interesting about that is, if that is the case, well, then if it's not a balance, if it doesn't contain everything, both good, positive, and negative, then where do things come from that are negative, or where do things come from that are corrupted? It would seem that, yeah, I don't know the answer. I don't know the answer. Did something get corrupted or spun around and maybe can be changed back or realigned? What's the explanation for it? I don't really know. And maybe that's above my ability to comprehend. So these are just some questions that I've had thinking about this section in this passage. Okay, next, there's another very important figure in Gnosticism, Barbelo. And this is, you could say, the first creation of the one. Okay, so Barbelo, she, given the feminine gender, the first power, the glory of Barbelo, the perfect glory among the Aeons, the glory of revelation. She glorified and praised the Virgin Spirit. She glorified and praised the Virgin Spirit, for because of the Spirit she had come forth. Spirit, again, is the one, the source. She is the first thought, the image of the Spirit. She became the universal womb, for she precedes everything. The Mother, Father, the first human, the Holy Spirit, the triple male, the triple power, the androgynous one with three names, the Aeon among the invisible things, the first to come forth. So she is this, it seems to be this perfect creation that is emanated from the mind of the source as a thought. Now, I included a little summary here just to give you guys more context. In the Apocryphon of John, Barbelo is the first emanation from the highest unknowable God, often called the invisible spirit, the monad, we've heard that, or the virginal spirit. She's not a human woman or a goddess in the ordinary mythological sense. She is more like the first divine self-expression of the source. Her role becomes especially important because she represents the pure original divine order before the rupture caused by Sophia. Sophia, and we're going to get to Sophia in a minute. Sophia later acts without her proper counterpart and produces Yaldabaoth, the ignorant creator archon who fashions the lower material world. So Barbelo is almost the opposite of Yaldabaoth. Barbelo is luminous, complete, divine womb of the true realm. Yaldabaoth is the deficient, ignorant ruler of the lower copy world. I've been thinking about this too as well. In some of these texts, perhaps these individual characters, I was just wondering this, I'd love to know your guys' thoughts. Perhaps these individual characters are representative of general streams of conscious, which could actually represent groups of individuals or groups of entities that share some sort of commonality. For example, Yaldabaoth, instead of being a single entity, could instead be the creation of a hive mind consciousness, almost like we think about reptilians or something like that, that have then strayed from the path and that have taken themselves to be as gods and just completely gone off the rails, which kind of lines up with, I think, the theories of what people are thinking might be going on and who the people are or the entities are that are in control of this realm. So I do find that interesting. As a potential way to merge everything together, I wonder if other people have said something along those lines, that these individual characters are instead representative of perhaps races or groups of entities. I don't know. Okay, now we get to the section of luminaries and aeons. So this section identifies these 4 luminaries, and each luminary has 3 different aeons. Again, this just speaks to this general structure of Gnosticism. So first we have, it says, grace dwells in the eternal realm of luminary Harmozal. So this is the first luminary, who is the first angel. There are 3 other aeons within this eternal realm. So we have grace, truth, and form. So these are like the characteristics, is my interpretation of the aeons, these seemingly all very positive characteristics. Then we have the second luminary, Oriel, who has been appointed with the second eternal realm. There are 3 aeons here: insight, perception, and memory. Memory, very interesting. Very interesting. When we talk about the memory wipe and that being taken away, that's the theory, right? The third luminary is Davatai, who has been, sorry if I mispronounced that, who has been appointed over the third eternal realm. There are 3 other aeons: understanding, love, idea, all positive. The fourth eternal realm has been set up for the fourth luminary, Eleleth. Eleleth. There are 3 other aeons with it: perfection, peace, and then we get to Sophia. Now, if you guys have been watching videos and trying to learn about Gnosticism as I have been, you know the name Sophia, right? And you know what's about to come next when it comes to Sophia. Okay. Now, did I kind of mess this up? Here it should say at the top, creation of Yaldabaoth. I don't know what happened with my, wait, did I zoom in or something? I don't know what happened. Okay, anyways, creation of Yaldabaoth from Sophia. Now, Sophia, who is the wisdom of insight and who constitutes an aeon, conceived a thought from herself with a conception of the invisible spirit and foreknowledge. She wanted to bring forth something like herself without the consent of the spirit, the one who had not given approval, without her partner and without his consideration. The male did not give approval. She did not find her partner, and she had considered this without the spirit's consent and without knowledge of her partner. Nonetheless, she gave birth, and because of the invincible power within her, her thought was not an idle thought. Something came out of her that was imperfect and different in appearance from her, for she had produced it without her partner. It did not resemble its mother and was misshapen. What does misshapen mean? Does that mean in the physical sense that we take to be misshapen, somewhat deformed or something along those lines? Could be, but I think here we're talking about energy. We're talking about thought. It sounds as though it was some corrupted thought, some corrupted idea. And how that happens, I have no idea, but thereby the creation of the offspring, Yaldabaoth, was therefore corrupted. When Sophia saw what her desire had produced, notice desire, interesting, right? So wonder if the desire is what corrupted the thought and the idea. It changed into the figure of a snake with the face of a lion. Its eyes were like flashing bolts of lightning. She cast it away from her, outside that realm, so that none of the immortals would see it. She produced it ignorantly. She surrounded it with a bright cloud and put a throne in the middle of the cloud so that no one would see it except the Holy Spirit, who is called the Mother of the Living. She named the offspring Yaldabaoth. So again, Yaldabaoth, also called the Demiurge in the Gnostic tradition, is the creator of the material world, which is what we are inside now, and is purportedly, according to Gnostic belief, a prison effectively for us. Now, here's that famous line that's in the Old Testament, and it's right here as well, but it's from Yaldabaoth. Okay, so very interesting. I think I've said this in videos before from obviously other sources that I'm citing, but that it seems to be one of the theories that the God of the Old Testament could be what they're calling Yaldabaoth in the Gnostic texts. So Yaldabaoth organized everything after pattern of first aeons that had come into being, so that he might create everything in an incorruptible form. Not that he had seen the incorruptible ones, rather because he's ignorant. Rather, the power that is in him that he had taken from his mother produced in him the pattern for the world order. When he saw creation surrounding him and the throng of angels around him that had come forth from him, he said to them, I am a jealous God, and there is no other God beside me. By announcing this, he suggested to the angels with him that there is another God. For if there were no other God, of whom would he be jealous, right? Fascinating statement. I think we've all heard this line and said, wait a minute, is this a monotheistic religion, right? Like, why would you say that? It doesn't make any sense unless there are other entities or gods that you're competing with, or you're playing the role of a god, something along those lines. And I hope people don't take offense to anything that I'm saying. This is just logic. I mean, I don't know what else to tell you. It's, if you're saying don't put any other god before me, what is the implication? It doesn't really make sense unless you are talking in a context of multiple potential uh, entities that could be claiming to be the one deity. Now we get into the creation of Adam, of humans. And another way that I've been trying to think about this is, how does it merge or meld with Sumerian texts, other accounts of how humans were created? And again, maybe some of this is symbolic, and maybe there are overlaps in terms of Yaldabaoth really representing a group of entities, or whatever it may be, creating humans. I don't know, but just trying to see if we can somehow, if these things all do fit together, connect in some abstract way. But anyways, here we go into the creation, I guess, story from this text, from the Apocryphon of John. Yaldabaoth said to the authorities with him, "Come, let's create human being after the image of God and with a likeness to ourselves, so that this human image may give us light." Okay, Adam may give us light. What does that mean? Okay, so this human image may give us light. You could interpret that a number of ways, right? Maybe give us appreciation because now we've created something, and so that's the light of appreciation of us building something. It could be that. It could also be, I mean, you guys know where I'm going with this. Obviously, give us light, give us energy. So this could also tie into the idea of them being created to give energy. Loosh is obviously where I'm going. Could also be into other interpretations. Give us light, maybe give us help, assistance, right? There's other theories that have talked about the creation of humans as a potential worker race to do different things. I don't know exactly what that means, and maybe this doesn't even connect, and I'm really reaching, but these are just some of the thoughts in my mind. They created through their respective powers according to the features that were given. Each of the authorities contribute a psychical feature corresponding to the figure of the image they had seen. They created a being like the perfect human and said, "Let's call it Adam, that its name may give us power of light." Again, power of light. What is that referring to? It's very interesting. There's a whole section in this text now where they say they give it the head, the left cheek, the butt cheek, the right butt. Like, I'm literally all this stuff. Obviously, I haven't included that, but they go through every part of the lungs, the heart, all this stuff that all these different entities are building into this body and into this human. Now, here's a very interesting thing that I've come across too: the passions that they put inside of humans. So, from the four demons have come passions. From grief come jealousy, envy, pain, trouble, distress, hard-heartedness, anxiety, sorrow, and others. Seems to be the opposite of the Aeons, right? The Aeons seem all positive things. These are all negative things. From pleasure comes abundance of evil, vain, conceit, and the like. From desire come anger, wrath, bitterness, intense lust, greed, and the like. From fear come terror, servility, anguish, and shame. Now, why have I highlighted this? Well, these obviously seem like some of these negative energies that we are potentially giving off via Loosh. And I wanted to make a clarification because I had cited a video a while back that talked about the discussion of something called the harvest of the passions in Gnosticism, which that term would seem to coincide exactly with this idea of this whole existence being a Loosh farm. Well, I actually didn't see anything discussed in the text that said a harvest of the passions. Then I searched online to see if that text existed anywhere, or that line existed anywhere. And as far as I can tell, it does not. Now, maybe it exists in another translation, or maybe it exists in another book. But as far as I can say, as far as I know right now, there is no line, an explicit line about the harvesting of these passions or these negative emotions. So I just wanted to put that out there, that that's not here, but I was on the lookout for it. So take it for what it's worth. Okay, next we get to this part where it is stated that Adam was too intelligent. I've heard other people talk about the same idea in other ancient texts or other accounts of the creation of humanity, that for whatever reason, there had to be potentially like modifications made to humanity because it had been made with, I guess, powers that made us difficult to control, or whatever it may be. And so these are theories that are talked about elsewhere as well, but it's in here too. So it says, he breathed his spirit into Adam, talking about Yaldabaoth. The spirit is the power of his mother. He's talking about Sophia, but he did not realize this because he lives in ignorance. So he's thinking he's creating life. But I guess what they're trying to say in this text is, no, it was actually Sophia's energy or essence that was being breathed into humans. The mother's power went out of Yaldabaoth and into the psychical body that had been made to be like the one who was from the beginning. The body moved and became powerful. It was enlightened. At once, the rest of the powers became jealous. So he's talking about the ones that built this body. Although Adam came into being through all of them, and they gave their power to this human, Adam was more intelligent than the creators and the first ruler. When they realized that Adam was enlightened and could think more clearly than they and was stripped of evil, they took and threw Adam into the lowest part of the whole material realm. Now we get into the idea of the memory wipe. Okay. Maybe I'm reaching, but this is talked about many, many times coming forward now, talking about forgetfulness over and over. The rulers brought Adam into the shadow of death so they might produce a figure again from earth, water, fire, and spirit that comes from matter. That is from the ignorance of darkness and desire and their own phony spirit. This figure is the cave for remodeling of the body that these criminals put on the human, the fetter of forgetfulness. Adam became a mortal person, the first to descend and the first to become estranged. Enlightened insight within Adam, however, was rejuvenating Adam's mind. So it sounds like they tried to get him to forget, but there's some enlightened insight that was coming that was rejuvenating his mind, maybe getting past this memory wipe. The first ruler knew Adam was disobedient to him because of enlightened insight within Adam, which made Adam stronger of mind than he. He wanted to recover the power that he himself had passed on to Adam. So he brought deep sleep upon Adam. What is that referring to? Is that again referring to this idea of deep sleep, of taking this knowledge or removing this knowledge? I don't know. I said to the Savior, what is this deep sleep? The Savior said, it is not as Moses wrote and you heard. He said in his first book, he put Adam to sleep. Rather, this deep sleep was a loss of sense. Could be other senses. It doesn't have to be memory, right? But it feels to me like they're talking about a loss of memory. Thus, the first ruler said through the prophet, I shall make their minds sluggish that they may neither understand nor discern. Now, you could look at that as an overall dumbing down, but yeah, I don't know. It feels like it's lining up with this idea of forgetfulness. The human beings were made to drink water of forgetfulness, coming up again by the first ruler so that they might not know where they had come from. I mean, right? This is, and again, it's obviously maybe not, has to be literally a water of it or whatever they're talking about, but some form of a memory wipe feels like is being discussed right now. For a time, the seed remained and helped so that when the spirit descends from the holy realms, it may raise up the seed and heal what it lacks, that the entire realm of fullness may be holy and lack nothing. Okay. All right, so this part is interesting because this talks about being saved, being taken out of the reincarnation cycle. And it doesn't talk about being, I guess you could say, virtuous or to worship in a particular way or belief. It doesn't talk about anything like that. It talks about knowledge. And this to me reminds me of the idea of awareness, the idea of understanding what's really going on so that you perhaps can avoid manipulation. Check this out. I said, Lord, where will the souls go when they leave their flesh? He laughed and said to me, the soul in which there is more power than the contemptible spirit is strong. Again, saying how powerful we are, which I've said many times. I feel like that narrative is adding up in so many ways. When you think about all the traps and tricks and deception that is being employed to keep us here, we must be pretty strong. I'm just saying. She escapes from evil, and through the intervention of the incorruptible one, she is saved and is taken up to eternal rest. I said, Lord, where will the souls go of people who have not known to whom they belong? Don't have knowledge of their true origins, don't really know what's going on. That's how I'm interpreting it. He said to me, the contemptible spirit has grown stronger in such people while they were going astray. The spirit lays a heavy burden on the soul, leads her into evil deeds, and hurls her down into forgetfulness, memory wipe. And the soul leaves the body. After the soul leaves the body, she is handed over to the authorities, archons, who have come into being through the archon. They bind her with chains and throw her into prison. What is this prison they're talking about? Are they talking about another body? I'm not sure. They go around with her until she awakens from forgetfulness and acquires knowledge. This is how she attains perfection and is saved. They go around with her until she awakens from forgetfulness. So is that going around in life after life? I'm not exactly sure, but it feels like that. This is how she attains perfection and is saved. Now, this next section, they talk very specifically about effectively reincarnation, how you will avoid being thrust back into flesh again. I said, Lord, how can the soul become younger and return into its mother's womb or into the human? He was glad when I asked this about this and said to me, you are truly blessed, for you have understood. This soul will be made to follow another soul in whom the spirit of life dwells, and she is saved through that one. Then she will not be thrust into flesh again. Then she will be out of the reincarnation cycle, that reincarnation loop. What they're talking about here, and I've actually looked this passage up to make sure I have full clarification on it. I'm going to show you that in a second. But what they're talking about here is the idea that enlightened entities can actually save others, which I just feel like it resonates with me, because think about all the people here that are trying to be lights for humanity. I mean, to me, if this statement has true significance, it feels as though all those folks who are pushing for knowledge and understanding and trying to help people, that this phrase right here is saying we can, the rest of us, we can attach to those, and we can all be potentially released from whatever's happening together. Now, here's the little explanation just to give it more color. This means a soul that is in danger of being dragged back into the cycle can be saved by attaching, following a more awakened or living soul, a soul that has the spirit of life within it. In Gnostic language, spirit of life means divine consciousness, true spiritual awareness, the spark from the higher realm. So the idea is not simply someone else saves you in a Christian church. Okay, so just distinguishing that. It is more like a confused soul can be rescued from reincarnation, but being guided by a spiritually alive soul, one that carries Gnosis, divine awareness, or the living spirit. And again, I don't say this to relieve people of the burden of having to figure stuff out and trying to learn and trying to understand and trying to be aware. I don't think it is any of that, but it does feel as though there is certainly a point and a meaning to this joint effort by so many people to spread the knowledge and to awaken a lot of folks, because I think that's what it's talking about. You can be attached and you can be awakened, and then step into your own power, step into your own sovereignty, and eventually escape. Pretty interesting. Now, I had to include this last clip because this last little section, because it does talk about something that I have been very anti this idea in general when it comes to the idea of eternal torment, eternal hell, this idea of eternal. This type of phrasing has always seemed nonsensical to me, because, as I've mentioned, I'm quoting actually Paul Wallace, but as he's mentioned, and I fully agree, to punish somebody eternally for something that is done in a finite amount of time is mathematically absurd. So I don't know what to make of this statement, but I felt I had to include it because it's one of these things that when I see it, I immediately it just feels bizarre to me, and it does not feel logical, and it feels like a threat. So, but I don't know exactly what to make of it. I found it in this one spot. I just wanted to include it just because I thought it was noteworthy. I said, Lord, where will these souls of people go who had knowledge but turned away? Had knowledge of I guess, what's really happening, but turned away. I don't know exactly what that means. Turned away from escaping, turned away from helping people escape. Like, what does that mean? I don't know. He said to me, they will be taken to the place where the angels of misery go, where there is no repentance. They will be kept there until the day. So this part also doesn't make sense. They will be kept there until the day when those who have blasphemed against the Spirit will be tortured and punished eternally. They will be kept there until the day when those blaspheme will be punished eternally. So again, we get into this idea of blasphemy and now having this eternal punishment. I don't know what to make of it, but like I said, I just wanted to include this because it just set off those alarm bells that go off in my head when I do read these things talking about eternal punishment for specific things. It just doesn't really add up in my mind. Anyways, don't want to dwell on this too much. But I thought I had to be fair to include it because I saw it in something that I've talked about many times. And so that's all I've got on this section. That is the last little chunk of the Nag Hammadi scriptures. But I thought there was a lot of sorry, not the entire Nag Hammadi scriptures, but the Apocryphon of John, which is a very, very famous text, especially I think for what a lot of people cite when they're talking about Gnosticism, the story of Yaldabaoth, the story of Sophia, the Aeons, and that whole section of the one describing the creator, the source, the God mind. So I found it all very, very interesting. Obviously, I also found it interesting to the relationship it has with the soul trap theory that we're obviously all currently investigating right now. So let me know your thoughts in the comments. Also, what are your thoughts in terms of how it blends together with everything else we've been learning about? I mean, do you see that it could make quite good sense if we look at some of these individual characters, perhaps representing groups of entities or some sort of hive mind of entities, as opposed to a singular individual or entity, as it reads when you read it? I don't know. Could be. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Thank you guys so much for joining, and we'll see you in the next video. Take it easy.